So, privilege escalation. Now, I think you would have heard about this privilege. Privilege is nothing but you might have some privileges, uh, like in common, and in with respect to the attackers' view, how do they escalate the privileges? Now, let's understand this. Privilege escalation is like a cyber intruder's journey from having a limited access gaining more powerful rights on the system. Imagine you are in a building at first floor. You only have access to lobby, but through certain tactics you manage to get a key card that grants access to the higher floors. So similar to that, whenever the attackers would be gaining some access or some way they could able to enter into the organizations or any of the systems, but they wanted to like uh, breach any of the server or breach the database or attack any of the sensitive data. So they need some privileges. So to get the privileges, they will be using certain tactics and techniques to get there. So an example with this would be think of a hacker who initially gains access to a regular user account on a computer. Through privilege escalation, they employ techniques to gain administrator level access, giving them more control over the system. So this is how they will be getting those privileges, and that's how they could able to uh, damage or disrupt any of the networks or ask for a ransom. So that would be the situation where they will be having a complete command and control over the network, and the the victim would doesn't have any of the opportunity other than paying the ransom. So if you would have taken necessary precautions or necessary tools or deploy proper skilled people in the organization, like SOC setup or IT security infrastructure, probably they would be having a less chances of getting compromised. And the other common factor where the attackers would be following is social engineering. Uh, in the social engineering, uh, this is the art of manipulating the people and uh, like making something a sensitive information which would be open, and it's like convincing someone to share their secrets by pretending to be a trustworthy. So there are certain techniques what they will be following, probably if you look at some of the phishing emails or spam emails. I think if you open your inbox you will be seeing a lot of such kind of an emails. Probably you are aware, or you have the sense of understanding what is phishing and spamming. So you don't pay attention, and also your Gmail has got that ability to differentiate which is in common, or which is regular email. So in the social engineering techniques, what the attacker will be doing is he will try to manipulate, as if he is sending an email from the bank, and you need an urgency attention to open that email, probably we are trying to reset your password, and if you don't reset your password for next 24 hours of time, then we are going to stop your banking services. Maybe such kind of uh, threatening kind of a situation they will be creating, and that's how they will try to fool the user. So in another way, there might be some kind of an email which pretends to be something which is going to help you out, or probably if you invest on certain things and you will be getting XYZ profits. So this kind of like social engineering techniques they will be following, and that could leads to an attack. And some of the examples with respect to the social engineering would be shoulder surfing. Now, what is shoulder surfing is like imagine standing behind someone at an ATM and watching them entering their PIN. The attacker gains access to the sensitive information just by observing. So the attackers would be very close by. I mean, we don't know. So that is the reason, like whenever you join any of the company, especially with the corporates, so they will be doing certain mandatory trainings for you, because the mandatory trainings would be more or the less like teaching you how to safeguard your data or your infrastructure, and like the laptops, and also they will be giving a lot of training sessions in order to like avoid browsing the certain sites, and usage of the internet from the open source, or like the public transport locations. So they will try to give so educate you in order to like not to get watched by any of the attacker or hacker. And also the another technique would be like dumpster diving. So this could be like think of a scenario where an attacker digs through the trash outside an office building, and finds discarded documents containing username and passwords. So what generally they will be doing, like they will try to get some of the useful content or some of the useful like things in with respect to somewhere the username password might be available. So they will be trying to dig that trashes. So probably this would have been also a training in your new joining company. So they will be saying that whatever the document you are using in office, it should not be. I mean, if it contains some sensitive information, don't throw like that. Don't use your common dustbins or something like that. So that leads to like a kind of social engineering attack, which simply say that dumpster diving. So that would be one of the example where like the attacker may get the information. And another technique would be like impersonating. Impersonating is something like consider a hacker who calls an employee pretending to be from IT support. That means like he will be telling something, he's working in the same company but from a different process, and convincing you to share the login credentials. So that is the reason in the like office environments they say never give your personal password, or like the login password, to any of the member even in the organization, because that might leads to impersonating. So that means he might be using your credentials and pretending as if you are the one who is talking to the some of your folks, and maybe it leads to kind of like security breach. So that's called the impersonating. And there are certain phases of hacking. So the phases of hacking could explain, like hacking is often like portrayed in the movies as a single dramatic act, but in reality it involves several structured phases. Think of it as a step-by-step process a cyber attacker follow to compromise a system. So let's see like how the phases would be included. The first phase would be the reconnaissance, and the second would be the scanning activity or the gaining access, maintaining the access, and clearing tracks, reporting. So these are the some of the phases with which they could able to compromise your servers, or maybe some of your most important stuff with related to the IT. So this includes a lot of phases. I mean, it's not just like how you see in the movies, or it not just happens like day or two. Usually what happens is, like, if the attackers are trying to compromise any of the company's sensitive information, or, like, they wanted to uh, uh, like uh, uh, theft the database. So it usually takes, like, several months or maybe sometimes years to get through the top notch database, or maybe to compromise certain sensitive information. So this will have the most common would be the reconnaissance. Now the reconnaissance is like the information gathering phase of haste. Like, before attempting anything, the attackers meticulously gather detailed details about the target. It's like, studying the layout of the building before planning a break-in. And the example would be, like, the tools which the attackers would be using would be nmap, or hiping, or multigo, and google docs. So these are the specific tools that the attackers would be using in order to have a first phase of the attack, which is called reconnaissance. So with this, they will be trying to gather some of the information about the company, and are there any specific email IDs which are published in the social media sites, or maybe, like, some or the other way, like, how to get an intro, like, how to establish a first level of connection. So they will try to get that information by doing the reconnaissance activity. So usually the tools which they are using is this one. So the other stage, which is the second stage, once they get the this kind of, like, entry point, so they will be doing the scanning activity. The scanning is where the attackers actively probes the target for vulnerabilities. Now what all the vulnerabilities are? Vulnerabilities are nothing but, like, the loopholes. So definitely there will be a loopholes in any of the organization for sure. Sometimes the administrators, or, like, the software developers himself will not be knowing that those vulnerabilities. So these guys, the attackers, will have a sophisticated tools in terms of, like, where they could able to evaluate the vulnerabilities in the organization. So it's comparable to check to have backdoors, or, like, windows for weakness during a break-in plan. So the most common tools which they will be using in terms of, like, the scanning activities would be the nessus and nespos and nmap. So the attacker scans the target's network, identifying potential entry points and weaknesses with these tools. And once they find out the weakness or the vulnerability, they will try to gain the access. That would be the next stage, where, they will try to gain the access, is likely finding that one unlocked door during a break-in. The attacker locates vulnerabilities and exploits them to gain the entry into the system. And to gain that, we have, or, like, they will be having a tool which is called metasploit. And the scenario would be, like, the attacker will be identifying a software vulnerability and uses metasploit to exploit it, gaining unauthorized access. And once the access is done, so they wanted to maintain the access, because they wanted to inject the payload to that particular system or the machine, and from there it has to reach to their end goal, where the final compromisation of the whatever the set goal is set for the attacker, he could able to achieve it. So the fourth stage would be, like, maintaining the access. Now the maintaining the access is kind of, like, akin to leaving a hidden key for future access. Once inside, the attacker installed the backdoors to ensure they can re-enter the system whenever needed. So the similar tool they will be using is Metasploit, where the attacker establishes the persistence access by planting backdoors, maintaining the control over the compromised systems. And another technique would be the clearing the tracks. Now in this clearing the tracks would more or the less like this will be like having unethical act where the attackers erases the evidence of their activities, leaving no trace behind. It's comparable to cleaning up after the uh, burglary to avoid detection. So if you would have looked at the last session or last class, there is one such kind of a sentence which says false negative. Now what is false negative? False negative is the one like where you have a standard tool to detect one of the viruses, but the virus is so much sophisticated that that could not able to uh, get a note, or like that could not able to traced by the antivirus tool which you have. So that is more dangerous. I mean, you have a tool which is built into identify the viruses, and if it is not capable to catch out the that particular viruses, then that leads to a false negative. So whenever the attackers try to do this deletion, or like removing the tracing outs of the their activities, so your system, your tools in the SOC operation should be more sophisticated and more updated to find out what these activities are doing, and what would be leading in terms of like if such kind of an activities are found, and how do we need to contain that process. And final point would be the reporting one, where like the reporting is the final step, but in ethical hacking, here an ethical hacker compliance a detailed report of the entire process, including tools used, vulnerabilities found, and overall success rate. So the so in order to like get all this documented, so once the attacker, or like basically we have two types of attackers or the hackers. One is gray hat hacker or black hat hacker. So their objectives are very clear. They wanted to damage or disrupt the network and gain the access, and they wanted to ask a ransom in a way to like to pay the that ransom. They are satisfied. So this is more or the less like stealing the data, and making the companies weak, and whatever the ransom they are asking, and if they are not able to mitigate it or contain it, there is no other go. The companies has to pay the ransom if they don't have a proper backing up mechanism. And if they don't deploy the proper ethical hacker, then there is no point in defending such kind of an attacks. So here the important points which are notable are, so whenever you see uh, certain things, or these are the tools which has been identified in your environment. So as we understand, like this nmap and hi ping and multigo or google docs, these are the tools which are used by the attackers. So whenever there is a presence of these kind of a tools in our vicinity or in our environment, so you need to understand, or you need to be proactive, understanding that there is something which is wrong. And whenever these tools are used, then you will have a understanding of like how the attacker, or which stage the attacker is in. So if you see, if these combinations of the tools are which are being identified by our SOC tools, like maybe your maybe your firewall, maybe your EDR. If they find such kind of a tools in our vicinity, then you can understand you are in the first stage of compromising stage. Second, if you see these kind of a tools which are found in our environment, you can understand you are in the second stage of compromising stage. So that's how we would be able to evaluating the identification of this compromising, or the attacker stage where they persist. So that is the reason, when you understand these techniques, what the attackers will follow. So we have a remediation technique for the SOC analyst, right? So if you look at the soc.pdf, our first, or the fifth page, which will show, or which will give you insights about the incident life cycle. So here in the incident life cycle, as a SOC analyst, whenever you find such kind of a tools or such kind of a scanning activities which are performed in your network, as a defensive guy, as a SOC analyst, you are the one who will be taking care of all these six phases. So if there is any breach, or maybe there might be the presence of the breach, so first thing, you need to be prepared enough to such kind of a breaches. And once you are prepared enough with your all tools and skilled people, then you need to have the power of identifying such kind of a breaches. And once you identified these breaches, you need to stop, in other way contain that breach, and you need to eradicate the certain systems or servers which have been compromised. So removing the malware or kind of a virus in our system, and making sure they are recovered back and put it back in the operations. And you have to do the final documentation post completion of that breach. So as a SOC analyst, your roles and responsibilities would be including monitoring of the SIM tools and certain sensitive information. You are also responsible for the incident lifecycle or incident response. We call it as IR, SOC and IR. So that is where our roles and responsibilities would include. So in the current session, you have looked at how the attacker will try to probe or try to come into our vicinity or come into the existence of our network, and what are the tools they would be using. And with the tools what they use, you as an incident response guy, you should be able to identify what kind of a level that your machines or systems has been compromised. So that part is something defending part. So there are the attackers and we are the defenders. So whenever the attack is in progress, so we have to be proactively looking at such kind of the factors. And whenever you find these kind of anomalies or suspicious activities, you need to stop, you need to contain, you need to prevent, you need to eradicate, you need to recover. That's the job of a SOC analyst. And in order to evaluate it, see, if you see, they have certain tools to exploit it, right? And in the similar way, we have certain tools to defend also. So we have an antivirus, we have an EDR, we have a firewall, we have an IPS, IDS. So those are the tools which will be detecting all these anomalies in the system. So those are the anomalies which are being detected in the defensive mechanism. They will be giving us the alarms or the alerts to the SIM tool, and from that SIM tool we are going to evaluate and look at the what all the suspicious activities which has been carried out, and for which machines or the computers this has been uh, compromised, and we need to ensure those machines to take isolate that machines and do the like antivirus scan to remove that particular malware and make the system ready. And whatever we have done it, so we need to have a documentation. So that's the job of a SOC analyst, and that's the roles and responsibilities of a SOC analyst. And this is how the attacker would be planning in terms of breaching any of the company's data. Okay.